They went back into the booth, Sleary shutting the door to keep intruders out. Bitzer, still holding the paralyzed culprit by the collar, stood in the ring, blinking at his old patron through the darkness of the twilight. "Bitzer," said Mr. Gradgrind, broken down and miserably submissive to him, "have you a heart?" "The circulation, sir," returned Bitzer, smiling at the oddity of the question, "couldn't be carried on without one. No man, sir, acquainted with the facts established by Harvey relating to the circulation of the blood, can doubt that I have a heart." "Is it accessible," cried Mr. Gradgrind, "to any compassionate influence?" "It is accessible to reason, sir," returned the excellent young man. "And to nothing else." They stood looking at each other, Mr. Gradgrind's face as white as the pursuer's. "What motive, even what motive and reason, can you have for preventing the escape of this wretched youth?" said Mr. Gradgrind, "and crushing his miserable father? See his sister here. Pity us." "Sir," returned Bitzer, in a very businesslike and logical manner, "since you ask me what motive I have in reason for taking young Mr. Tom back to Coketown, it is only reasonable to let you know. I have suspected young Mr. Tom of this bank robbery from the first. I had had my eye upon him before that time, for I knew his ways. I have kept my observations to myself, but I have made them, and I have got ample proofs against him now, besides his running away, and besides his own confession, which I was just in time to overhear. I had the pleasure of watching your house yesterday morning, and following you here. I am going to take young Mr. Tom back to Coketown, in order to deliver him over to Mr. Bounderby. Sir, I have no doubt whatever that Mr. Bounderby will then promote me to young Mr. Tom's situation. And I wish to have his situation, sir, for it will be a rise to me, and will do me good. If this is solely a question of self-interest with you," Mr. Gradgrind began. "I beg your pardon for interrupting you, sir," returned Bitzer, "but I am sure you know that the whole social system is a question of self-interest. What you must always appeal to is a person's self-interest. It's your only hold. We are so constituted. I was brought up in that catechism when I was very young, sir, as you are aware." "What sum of money," said Mr. Gradgrind, "will you set against your expected promotion?" "Thank you, sir," returned Bitzer, "for hinting at the proposal, but I will not set any sum against it. Knowing that your clear head would propose that alternative, I have gone over the calculations in my mind, and I find that to compound a felony, even on very high terms indeed, would not be as safe and good for me as my improved prospects in the bank." "Bitzer," said Mr. Gradgrind, stretching out his hands as though he would have said, "See how miserable I am. Bitzer, I have but one chance left to soften you. You were many years at my school. If, in remembrance of the pains bestowed upon you there, you can persuade yourself in any degree to disregard your present interest and release my son, I entreat and pray you to give him the benefit of that remembrance." "I really wonder, sir," rejoined the old pupil in an argumentative manner, "to find you taking a position so untenable. My schooling was paid for, it was a bargain, and when I came away, the bargain ended. It was a fundamental principle of the Gradgrind philosophy that everything was to be paid for. Nobody was ever on any account to give anybody anything, or render anybody help without purchase. Gratitude was to be abolished, and the virtues springing from it were not to be. Every inch of the existence of mankind, from birth to death, was to be a bargain across a counter. And if we didn't get to heaven that way, it was not a politico-economical place, and we had no business there. I don't deny," added Bitzer, "that my schooling was cheap. But that comes right, sir. I was made in the cheapest market, and have to dispose of myself in the dearest." He was a little troubled here, by Louisa and Sissy crying. "Pray don't do that," said he, "it's of no use doing that, it only worries. You seem to think that I have some animosity against young Mr. Tom, whereas I have none at all. I am only going, on the reasonable grounds I have mentioned, to take him back to Coketown. If he was to resist, I should set up the cry of "Stop thief!" But he won't resist, you may depend upon it. Mr. Sleary, who with his mouth open and his rolling eye as immovably jammed in his head as his fixed one, had listened to these doctrines with profound attention, here stepped forward. "Squire, you know perfectly well, and your daughter knowth perfectly well, better than you, because I said it to her, that I didn't know what your thon had done, and that I didn't want to know. I said it wath better not, though I only thought, then, it wath Tommy skylarking. However, thith young man having made it known to be a robbery of a bank, why, that h a there a thing, muth to there a thing for me to compound, adh thith young man hath very properly called it. Consequently, squire, you mustn't quarrel with me if I take thith young man th thide, and they he th right and there th no help for it. But I tell you what I'll do, squire, I'll drive your thon and thith young man over to the rail, and prevent expether here. I can't content to do more, but I'll do that." Fresh lamentations from Louisa, and deeper affliction on Mr. Gradgrind's part, followed this desertion of them by their last friend. But Sissy glanced at him with great attention, nor did she in her own breast misunderstand him. As they were all going out again, he favored her with one slight roll of his movable eye, desiring her to linger behind. As he locked the door, he said excitedly, "The thquire stood by you, Thethilia, and I'll stand by the thquire. More than that, thith of the Prethioth Rathcal, and belongeth to that blustering cove that my people nearly pithed out o' Winder. It'll be a dark night. I've got a horse that'll do anything but speak. I've got a pony that'll go 15 mile an hour with Childerth driving of him. I've got a dog that'll keep a man to one place 24 horth. Get a word with the young squire. Tell him, when he thieth our horth begin to damn the, not to be afraid of being spilt, but to look out for a pony gig coming up. Tell him, when he thieth that gig close by, to jump down, and it'll take him off at a rattling path. If my dog leth thith young man thur a peg on foot, I give him leave to go. And if my horth ever stirreth from that spot where he begin the dancing, till the morning, I don't know him, thark th the word." The word was so sharp, that in 10 minutes Mr. Childers, sauntering about the marketplace in a pair of slippers, had his cue, and Mr. Sleary's equipage was ready. It was a fine sight, to behold the learned dog barking round it, and Mr. Sleary instructing him, with his one practicable eye, that Bitzer was the object of his particular attentions. Soon after dark they all three got in and started, the learned dog, a formidable creature, already pinning Bitzer with his eye, and sticking close to the wheel on his side, that he might be ready for him in the event of his showing the slightest disposition to alight. The other three sat up at the inn all night in great suspense. At 8 o'clock in the morning Mr. Sleary and the dog reappeared, both in high spirits. "All right, squire," said Mr. Sleary, "your thon may be aboard a thip by thith time. Childerth took him off, an hour and a half after we left there last night. The horse Dan fed the polka till he wath dead beat, he would have walthed if he hadn't been in harneth, and then I gave him the word and he went to sleep comfortable. When that Prethioth young Rathcal said he'd go for art afoot, the dog hung onto his neck handkercher with all 4 legs in the air and pulled him down and rolled him over. Though he come back into the drag, and there he that, till I turned the horse head, at 6:30 this morning." Mr. Gradgrind overwhelmed him with thanks, of course, and hinted as delicately as he could, at a handsome remuneration in money. "I don't want money mythelf, squire, but Childerth is a family man, and if you wath to like to offer him a £5 note, it mightn't be unacceptable. Likewise if you wath to stand a collar for the dog, or a that of belth for the horse, I thould be very glad to take him. Brandy and water I always take." He had already called for a glass, and now called for another. "If you wouldn't think it going too far, squire, to make a little spread for the company at about 3 and 6 the head, not reckoning Luth, it would make em happy." All these little tokens of his gratitude, Mr. Gradgrind very willingly undertook to render. though he thought them far too slight, he said, for such a service. Very well, Thquire, then, if you'll only give a horthriding, a Beth Peak, whenever you can, you'll more than balanthy the account. Now, Thquire, if your daughter will ethcuth me, I thould like one parting word with you. Louisa and Sissy withdrew into an adjoining room. Mr. Sleary, stirring and drinking his brandy and water as he stood, went on. Thquire, you don't need to be told that doth ith wonderful animalth. Their instinct, said Mr. Gradgrind, is surprising. Whatever you call it, and I'm bleft if I know what to call it, said Sleary, it ith after nothing. The way in with the dog'll find you, the dithtanthy he'll come. His scent, said Mr. Gradgrind, being so fine. I'm bleft if I know what to call it, repeated Sleary, shaking his head, but I have had doth find me, Thquire, in a way that made me think whether that dog hadn't gone to another dog, and fed. You don't happen to know a perthon of the name of Fleary, do you? Perthon of the name of Fleary, in the horthriding way, thout man, game I? And whether that dog mightn't have fed, well, I can't say I know him myself, but I know a dog that I think would be likely to be acquainted with him. And whether that dog mightn't have thought it over, and fed, Fleary. Oh yeth, to be sure. A friend of mine mentioned him to me at one time. I can get you hith address directly. In consequence of my being afore the public, and going about the mooth, there must be a number of doth acquainted with me, Thquire, that I don't know. Mr. Gradgrind seemed to be quite confounded by this speculation. Anyway, said Sleary, after putting his lips to his brandy and water, ith 14 month ago, Thquire, thin the we wath at Chester. We wath getting up our children in the wood one morning, when there cometh into our ring, by the thatage door, a dog. He had travelled a long way, he wath in a very bad condition, he wath lame, and pretty well blind. He went round to our children, one after another, as if he wath a deeking for a child he knowed, and then he come to me, and throwed hithelf up behind, and thtood on hith 2 forelegs, weak adh he wath, and then he wagged hith tail and died. Thquire, that dog wath Merrylegs. Sissy's father's dog. Thethilioth father old dog. Now, Thquire, I can take my oath, from my knowledge of that dog, that man wath dead and buried afore that dog come back to me. Jothfine and Childerth and me talked it over a long time, whether I thood right or not. But we agreed, no. There nothing comfortable to tell, why unsettle her mind, and make her unhappy? Though, whether her father bathely deserted her, or whether he broke his own heart alone, rather than pull her down along with him, never will be known, now, Thquire, not till we know how the doth findeth out. She keeps the bottle that he sent her for, to this hour, and she will believe in his affection to the last moment of her life, said Mr. Gradgrind. It seemed to breathe two things to a perthon, don't it, Thquire, said Mr. Sleary, musing as he looked down into the depths of his brandy and water. One, that there ith a love in the world, not all self-interest after all, but tomy thing very different. T'other, that it hath a way of ith own of calculating or not calculating, with tomy how or another ith at least adh hard to give a name to, adh the waith of the dothith. Mr. Gradgrind looked out of window, and made no reply. Mr. Sleary emptied his glass and recalled the ladies. Thethilia, my dear, kith me in goodbye. Myth Thquire, to thee you treating of her like a thither, and a thither that you truthed in honor with all your heart and more, ith a very pretty sight to me. I hope your brother may live to be better deserving of you, and a greater comfort to you. Thquire, thake hanth, first, and laughed. Don't be croth with ith poor vagabonds. People must be amoved. They can't be always a learning, nor yet they can't be always a working, they ain't made for it. You must have us, Thquire. Do the wise thing and the kind thing too, and make the best of us, not the worst. And I never thought before, said Mr. Sleary, putting his head in at the door again to say it, that I was the mouth of a cackler.